Welcome to Drift Guitars. My name is Chris, behind the camera, Matt, as always, and in this episode, we're actually going to get the neck glued to this guitar. So I'm super excited for it to finally be at that point where it looks like a guitar. In the last episode, what you saw me do was go ahead and get these frets leveled and polished out. They're looking really, really good. And gluing the neck on for a mortise and tenon style neck, which is what this is with a bolt on, it's super straightforward, and basically it just involves removing masking tape. And I know that that sounds really, really simple and like how hard can it be, but it's really easy to mess this step up and cause yourself some serious headaches. What we have left on this neck in order to get it glued on is obviously we're going to be gluing this section on where the fingerboard extension is, and we have all this masking tape on here, so we need to get it pulled out. But in order to do it safely, what we have to do is break that seam that's on here. What I like to use is just a razor blade and very, very carefully kind of just run it along here. I do it like 2 or 3 times, and that's about it. It's really easy to slip and mess this up, so just be careful with it as you do it. And then we do the same thing here. Cool, we got that, and then I can just take my razor blade and run it this way and pull that off without risking messing up that finish. And that's why I'm so cautious with that step. Everything else is looking good. We've got a couple of spots here that just feel like you're not going to be able to pick that up on camera, where it just feels like there's a overhang of some finish. So there we go. Just very carefully removing any sort of extra residue of finish, because that is the same masking tape that was there for when we did the paint job on this guitar, obviously. Okay, that's looking good, feeling good. What we need to do on this fingerboard extension area on the body is do the exact same thing. The way that I do this, I think I actually have, what I have is this template. This template right here actually is only to the 14th fret, so you can imagine that it actually is wider down here at the fingerboard extension. But what you can see is that the masking tape that I put on this guitar is smaller than the footprint of the actual fingerboard extension. What I used to do was actually mask out exactly to the same size as the fingerboard was at, but I realized I don't need to do that. The other thing that would happen is that it was really easy to get water in between those two, or sweat, and it would cause the finish to lift. So I actually like for my finish to be tucked up underneath the glue joint, and that's why I do my tape up this way. What I did was just use a standard piece of masking tape, some frog tape, and just stuck it right on there, smack in the middle. And that's how wide it is. I hope that makes a little bit of sense. So in order to remove it, all I'm gonna do is kind of cut around it. I know that it's kind of, the edges of the tape are also not as sharp as they used to be because it's been sanded down a little bit. But we don't want to cut into the spruce here. We just want to cut through the finish. We're just trying to break the seal. Just a little bit more here. A little bit here. And then I'll take and I'll knock off this edge. I'll knock off that edge. And I'll see if we can't get started down here. Yes. Just remember, as you are almost done with your guitar, if you're following along at home, it's the little things that'll bite you. It's like, oh, just pulling off tape off of the guitar. I don't need to spend too much time thinking about how to do that, but every single step you do at this point, you need to be thinking about what can go wrong. And the biggest thing that can go wrong at this point on any guitar build is finish issues. So that's kind of why I'm overemphasizing the need to be very, very careful with your tape removal, because I have been bit, and I will probably be bit again down the road. Heck, it might even happen live here on camera, messing up the finish, and then you just have to take so many steps backwards from that point. And it's just nothing more defeating than messing up the finish in, the bottom of the 9th inning. Okay, so as we come up and around the tenon, or the mortise, I'm gonna do the same thing, take my razor blade at about a 45-degree angle, and I'm just gonna knock off that, break the seal, so that we don't lift up the finish around here either. And then that'll come right out. A little bit of schmoo down in there, but that's pretty typical. You always end up with a little bit of just buffing compounds and residues inside of there. It's not really that big of a deal. I'm going to carefully remove this little bit of masking tape that's still showing. Something else I like to do is this ledge on here is very tiny. It's just the thickness of the finish, which is really not much. Is I actually take a very sharp chisel. You don't have to do this, but I actually like to run it along here and kind of just smooth off that ledge as well on the finish, just to make it so that we get better glue contact across here. Yeah, that's way better. This whole method of me attaching the fingerboard, this doesn't need to be like carrying a structural load very much. We're just going to have a little bit of glue on here just to hold this in place. In fact, a lot of modern builders are doing a bolt-on fingerboard extension as well, which is something I absolutely want to do and plan to do down the road, and then I'll be able to eliminate this glue-on process altogether. But for now, this is how I do it. I just don't want people seeing what I'm doing here and be like, that doesn't seem like he's doing a very good job of making sure that this is all nice and tidy and neat, but it doesn't need to be. So, I mean, it literally has no bearing on the finished instrument whatsoever. So that's why it's kind of like, you know, you're gonna get it cleaned off and ready to go, and you don't need to put too much more thought into it than that. I'm just making sure that we don't have any hard edges here. I'm taking a 320 and just kind of cleaning off those edges. One thing I definitely want to recommend that you do before we actually put the glue on here and we do it for real is to dry fit everything. So we're going to just put our bolts on, tighten everything down, and just double check that everything's exactly how it was when we were building the guitar. Worst case scenario is that you'd have the glue on here and then realize there's some sort of issue that you have to address, and I've done that. Yeah, I don't recommend it. I don't recommend it at all. So yeah, we'll just get this kind of snugged down. Something else that you can do as well as not just bolting it down, but also dry testing how you're going to clamp it up if you've not done this before. I'm not going to do that here just because I obviously know how I'm going to clamp it. But if this is your first time, I would recommend you go ahead and come up with a plan on your clamping method and test it all out without any glue attached. That way you can kind of not be in a hurry when that time comes. So I'm going to just check and make sure my alignment is where I left it at, which it is. That looks really nice. And then we're going to check our string height. Put this on here. 375. Yep. So that looks really good. So yeah, I know where everything is right where I want it to be, and that means that we can go ahead, pull this off. I'll show you how much glue that we apply. We're going to get this thing clamped up just in this area right here, and we'll be done with this step. So let me pull this neck bag off. Pretty straightforward, obviously, right? We stick some glue on it, we stick some clamps on it, we call it done. The only thing that I'm gonna say that you wanna do, just for a little bit of insurance, is I like to take some 60 grit sandpaper and just on this wood that's right here, just the bare wood, being careful not to hit the actual polished finish on here. And we're just gonna scuff this up just a little bit. Little circle lines, or circles here. Get that wood kind of roughed up so that glue has a little bit more to hold on to. It's not rocket surgery. This is one of those rare situations where you want to sand kind of against the grain, get it all roughed up. And we're going to do the same thing over here. This is all pretty rough already, but I like to take some 60 grit and kind of get it scuffed up as well. All right, feels good, looks good. What we're going to do now is get it glued on. So, like I said, if you guys have had a chance to dry fit everything, at that point you should have everything you need. I like to use these little, I think these are 3-inch F clamps, these Jorgensen, son of Jorg. They work really well, at least for my guitars, and this is going to depend on your construction style. I have my transverse brace that runs here, so I just need a little bit of a bit of clearance to go around my transverse brace, and these F clamps work really good for me. Once again, make sure you do a dry clamp up so that you can make sure that all your clamps are going to work before you get the glue on the guitar. We're going to use a little bit of our tight bond here, classic non-outdoor tight bond, and glue this neck on. We're just going to put a little bit here. I don't really want to have any squeeze out with this. This is mostly, like I've been saying, just to kind of hold that fingerboard extension down. This is not something that's like, you know, you want to clamp it or put so much glue on it that you can never get it off again. In fact, the opposite, you want to make sure that this can come off fairly easy in the future in case you ever need to do a neck reset on your guitar. So that's actually more glue than I typically do on one of my guitars. Kind of like that. Feels good. I don't mind if I get a little squeeze out, it's just easier if I don't. Put that there. I've got my bolts ready to go over here, and then we're just going to carefully slide this into place. I recommend coming down like this if you can, so you don't slide glue everywhere. So we'll do that. Okay, so as far as how tight do you want to take your bolts, that is something that's going to depend on, if you're doing a bolt-on neck, that's going to depend on how confident you are in that mortise and tenon joint. I have worked for years to figure out exactly how tight it needs to be. If you go too tight, you can actually split the wood, so that's just something to be aware of. You want it tight, but it does. The bolts are holding the neck in place. The bolts aren't like squeezing the neck into place. I hope that makes sense. I used to have this misconception that you really wanted to tightly bolt the neck down, and that's really not the case. You just want to make sure that the neck is not moving at all. So, you know, I used to know my inch pounds pretty well, but I don't know. This is not much. This is probably 20 inch-pounds of torque that I'm putting on here. It's just a feel thing. It's impossible for me to be able to coach up. But I think we've got that where I want it now. You could, if you wanted to, put a little Loctite on those bolts if you want to. I've never had issues with the bolts going loose. So that's in place. The next thing that I want to do is get this fingerboard extension put in. Actually, I screwed up, Matt. Well, that's a whole clamp that I forgot to put on. I almost forgot to do this. Before I tighten the bolts up, I've loosened them back up again because I like to put a clamp on temporarily right in this direction to squeeze that fingerboard against the soundboard. And I put a little, paper towel there just to hold it all in place. So before I tighten those bolts down, I'm gonna go ahead and squeeze down on this part, then tighten those bolts down. That way I make sure that we're gap free here under the fingerboard extension. Almost forgot. You just wanna go until you hear it crack. That's good. I can go ahead and pull that off. And now we can go ahead and do the fingerboard extension. So I used to put cauls and stuff on here, but honestly, you don't need it. I just took my one clamp, put it on here, smack in the middle, give her the old tighten up. Yeah, that looks super good. That's how you glue a neck onto a guitar if you're doing a bolt-on neck. If you're doing a dovetail, good luck. You're gonna have to watch a different video because I don't ever do those. So we've got the neck on the guitar. We're gonna let this sit overnight just for a little bit of insurance. Next video, what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and do all of the bridge work, make the bridge, get the bridge glued on. Yeah, man, real excited, and hope you guys learned something on this one, and we'll see you in the next one.